The conversations about the losses of SOEs have come up over and again, and it has become even more critical now with the discussion about the $1.7 billion loss in gold purchase and the gold program, and whether or not it should be Gold Board or the Bank of Ghana who should take responsibility for this loss. But beyond the politicking of it is also the main question of how do we stop the financial drain within our SOEs. Hi, good evening and welcome to Agenda. My name is Beatrice Edwin. Tonight we want to look into all the avenues available to probe the losses of SOEs, including the Gold Board, depending on where you stand, and the way forward in minimizing the losses from SOEs. My name is Beatrice Edwin. Thank you very much for joining us on the program tonight. Remember that Agenda is also being streamed on all our social media platforms. Do send us your comments. When they do come in time, we'll read them back to you. And we're also streaming live as well on Shri FM 92.7. I do have in the studio with me the Honorable Adam Agbana. He is the Member of Parliament for Ketu North in the Volta region and also Member of Parliament's Public Accounts Committee. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Beatrice, and thank you for having me.
I also do have in the studio with us Mr. Jeffrey Okanse. He's an anti-corruption advocate. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, and thanks for having me, madam.
We have a video call with us, Dr. Eric Boachi-Adom. He's financial economist, senior lecturer at the UPSA. Good evening to you, sir, as well. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Beatrice, and thank you for having me.
Perhaps I can start with you. Looking at the enormity of the loss and indeed the gains that we've made, and I'm talking about the 2025 figures that we have, how do you interpret the conversations we've had so far, especially regarding how to probe the losses of SOEs? Now we're talking about the Gold Board and the Bank of Ghana.
Yeah, so the losses as usually outlined in the audited statement or from the Auditor General's report keep going up, and there's a need for us to find drastic measures to address it. What makes the Gold Board issue a little bit tricky is sometimes the personalities involved. I'm sure that if we can take the personalities out and dispassionately look at the substance of the issue, we'll be able to find a lasting solution to the challenges. I think there are basically maybe two main things that we are aware of from the IMF report contributing to the Gold Board challenges, or there's a Gold Board and BOG, so that it will be fairly balanced. You know, is number one, how the funds from BOG reaches Gold Board at an interbank rate, then you pay the miners or the small scale miners at a forex rate. Obviously, from the word go, you are going to make some losses in there because there will be disparities in the rate at which you are taking the money and you are also making payment. Then you look at the discount that is usually given to buyers to encourage them to be able to take our gold. You know, so putting the structural issues together, I think we have to look at overall architecture and find ways in removing these structural issues and not so much be worried about where we should put the blame. Because in the end, whether it goes to Gold Board comes to Ministry of Finance, when it sits on Bank of Ghana's balance sheet, we are calling for recapitalization at somewhere in March this year. Government raised about $5 billion in bonds to support the Bank of Ghana, and the Bank of Ghana is still in a negative position in excess of about 90 billion Ghana cedis, which means that we need to find the money, whether through bonds or some other means to finance Bank of Ghana. So the debate should not be where the losses should sit, but the debate should be what should we do differently so that we don't come back next year to come and have this conversation again.
And Dr. Boachi-Adom, where you ended is also, or one of the points you made had to do with why we had the $1.7 billion loss. And I'm coming to you, Mr. Okanse, before I come to the Honorable Eric Agbana. If you read the IMF report that Dr. Boachi-Adom just referred to, one of the things he mentioned was the scaling up of this domestic gold purchase program. How do you expect us to go about probing? We've already heard what the minority in Parliament is asking for and a bit of what the government and representatives are also saying.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and this is a lackluster as you put me in a discussion with my lecturer. I mean, I'm a PhD student at UPSA, so good evening to my lecturer from my institution. As we move forward, I mean, quickly, I would like to see it as cost, not losses, respectfully. I see them, this is a cost of trading. Whilst you are trading to make inroads, to correct certain things that you would look for it to do, you have incurred some, costs from the trade. And so at the end of the day, like initially he mentioned the rates and then also the discounts you offer to make sure that the traders sell to you. I mean, this is the deliberate move that some of us in Ghana have always been mentioning, that it was to check some things that were ongoing, the smuggling of gold, and then also some of the trade, the re-entry, those who smuggle into other countries and bring it back into the country. There's a lot of them that goes on around the illicit financial flows. And these were the things we wanted to check with some of this initiative that came with the gold board. So the cost of trading is what I'm sure my senior was referring to. Indeed, whilst you go ahead with that, you were asking, how do we trace these ones? They are in the books. In the audited books of gold board, these figures are there. And in the books of Bank of Ghana, you will find them there. And it is not new. It is not novel, like we all know. It is not novel. So let's go to the facts. Some facts we need to actually note is that it was not on the books of Gold Board, please. Respectfully, let's note this one. It was on the books of Bank of Ghana. Gold Board undertook the trade on behalf of the Bank of Ghana, and there were some trade costs that were incurred. Indeed, the Bank of Ghana, why would they want to engage in this? Is to actually ensure that they are able to perform their monetary policy role effectively. And that is why they went into such. I mean, even these practices, not only by institution, domestically we used to do them.
So the question I'm asking is, how do you expect us to probe it? Because there are a number of suggestions coming up.
That's what I'm saying, it's easy to probe. The documents are there. You have the audited
in terms of which institution? So we have the minority asking for the ad hoc committee in Parliament, bipartisan ad hoc committee, and there's also the argument about the Public Accounts Committee, which is equally there as well to look at this.
So quickly, I'll tell you this. There are structures in place already. We don't need to form any other bipartisan whatever. The structures are there. Let those who are confused come back home and let's talk to the structures that have been laid straight. Within the Gold Board itself, they have their internal auditing system. And then out externally, in fact, there is the Auditor General's report that has actually gone in there to do all the checks and gather all the facts for you. Beyond that, the Auditor General's report will not sit. It will go back to the Parliament. And that's why I'm confused. I mean, the Public Account Committee is a bipartisan committee on its own already. So, I mean, whoever talked about bipartisan would have to come back again, because there is already a bipartisan committee, which is called the Public Account Committee, which probes the Auditor General's report. And their work is not only just probing and asking questions. It goes beyond that. Whether they found that people have made losses that they need to be made to face some punishment, they recoup for us. One of the roles of a Public Account Committee is to recoup losses, and we've had them speak to people that, look, you need to refund X amount of money that we've lost through your operation. So indeed, these are the facts that exist. It was a trade cost that we incurred, and the Gold Board did those purchases on behalf of the Bank of Ghana. On the books of Bank of Ghana, I've told you it's not novel. In 2022 alone, we recorded 60.81 billion Ghana cedis, okay, in 2022. And it is not a loss. It is a cost that we recorded. What you need to look at it is that as part of their role as Bank of Ghana, they are managing your monetary policy. And you are expecting that once they actually incur this cost, there should be some outcomes that you are expecting. And that will come out to say that you are looking at your inflation rate. You are going to be looking at the forex looking at the CD against the foreign currencies, especially the dollar. You are going to be looking at policy rates for the banks. So these are the things that you'll be looking at. It is not like a given that they are to spend and get spent. But then at the end of the day, if you look at 2022, like you are saying, there was high inflation, there was a depreciated CD, there was scarce dollar, and then also the CD losing against the dollar. As against today that you are speaking about. Can I please just a jip on that one so that we can know what to compare as we speak? Because in 2022 alone, the inflation was 54%. In the same 2022, the CD to dollar was 9.75 Ghana cedis to a dollar. As at the time close out of that period, this is what we recorded in that year alone. We come to 2026, what are you seeing? You are seeing inflation 4.6. Okay? You are looking at a dollar which is 11.15 as I checked yesterday. And that is what we are talking about. So when you ingest this 22 billion that we are talking about, you are looking at what came out of it. That is the role the Bank of Ghana is expected to play. And that's where we have to end it.
And that's
you look at what was invested. That's what I call the cost, not the losses. It's a cost incurred. And then you look at what outcomes that you got from it. And that is the role that the Bank of Ghana is expected to play.
And I'll come to you very shortly. But we're talking about which of the agencies or which of the mechanisms, as it were, we should use in probing not just the Gold Board, as we've had the Minority Leader Alexander Penyumakin calling for, but also all other SOEs that may be involved in losses. I want us to watch the video, first of all, before I come to you, of the Minority Leader Alexander Penyumakin when he addressed the press about why there was a need for the CEO of the Gold Board, Sami Gyamfi, to be called before Parliament to answer some questions.
By the fund's own numbers, the Bank of Ghana's equity stood at negative 93.8 billion cedis at the end of last year, negative 6.7% of GDP. Our central bank is technically bankrupt, therefore. And the single biggest driver of that collapse in the 2025 was gold operations, Gold Board. Gold Board's own domain, 22 billion cedis. That's equivalent of the 1.7 billion US dollars in 1 year alone. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, let's call it what it is. These losses are not bad luck. You don't trade in gold and make losses. They are not a difficult market. They expose the crass incompetence of Gold Board's management and misaligned policy of the government. No serious institution loses this much money by accident. This is what happens when an untouchable few are handed the nation's gold with no one watching and no one willing to ask questions. Gold Board must tell Ghanaians the following. 1, what prices were paid for gold? How were those prices determined? What premiums, if any, were paid to secure the supply? How were international off-takers selected? At what discounts were their gold sold? How much was earned by Gold Board in service and asset charges from transactions financed by Bank of Ghana? What commercial risk did Gold Board itself bear? What transactional risk were passed automatically to Bank of Ghana? What internal risk controls existed to protect the financier, the Bank of Ghana?
And of course, Mr. Penyumakin went on to ask for and said that actually he was going to ensure that the CEO of Gold Board comes before Parliament. And we know that he's already filed a motion and the Speaker of Parliament has equally said that he will admit that motion. And that's why I want to come to you, the Honourable Edem Agbana. Aside from being a Member of Parliament, you're also a member of the Public Account Committee as well. The MPP has called for a bipartisan ad hoc committee investigation into this. First of all, let me find out what is the NDC stance when it comes to whether or not you believe that an ad hoc bipartisan committee is the way to go, or we have the Public Accounts Committee, which is already probing how we use our state resources.
Right. So Beatrice, let me begin the conversation by putting it into both the constitutional and the institutional perspective. in a proper context, for the NDC majority in Parliament and for the NDC government, we believe in transparency, we believe in accountability. We believe that when you are a public servant entrusted with the mandate to manage public resources, it is an incidence for you to account anytime the public calls on you. And so the NDC government, the NDC majority, appointees of President Mahama will not and has never run away from accountability. The question as to whether it should be a bipartisan committee or a public accounts committee is what we need to probe. And Beatrice, Public Accounts Committee of Parliament is a bipartisan committee. In fact, it is one of the few committees of Parliament that has the chairperson being a member of the party that is not in power. If at the framers of the Constitution envisaged a day when maybe a government institution, a government appointee, or any of us in government may appear before such a committee, to the extent that in the new standing orders of Parliament that we have, in a situation where a matter is being considered and the matter happened under the previous government, the chairmanship changes. That is why last year, 2025, throughout all our sittings as Public Accounts Committee, the Honorable Abena Osei Asare had to give the chairperson or the chair to the ranking member. And so Public Accounts Committee is already a bipartisan committee and is actually one of the few committees with the chairperson or the leadership belonging to the opposition party. And that is very significant. What it means is that if Sami Jemfi or any chief executive or any minister appears before the Public Accounts Committee today, that person is answerable to a 25-member committee chaired by a member of the minority. And so Public Account is already a bipartisan committee. The issue of Public Accounts Committee and bipartisan committee or ad hoc committee, all these things are grounded in law. Article 103 of our Constitution grants Parliament that mandate to establish committees to help in its effective discharge of our duties. And so, in drafting the standing orders, Order 206 established the Public Accounts Committee as a standing committee of Parliament. It goes further in Order 229 to give even the Public Accounts Committee further powers to establish subcommittees to deal with matters of interest. And so, Public Accounts Committee, as we have it today, in terms of composition, in terms of the legal backing, Public Accounts Committee has what it takes to deal with issues surrounding losses of state-owned enterprises.
So is it my understanding that is the stance of the majority, that you do not think that we need any other
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. However, again, the same Constitution grants Parliament the authority to, at any point in time, establish a committee that they believe in the interest, in the public interest, it can help. And that is why when you check Article 1875 of our Constitution, it is stated there that when the Auditor General submits the report to Parliament, in the interest of the public, Parliament may appoint a committee. What it means is that it is not automatic that even though the standing order says that it is Public Accounts Committee that is supposed to look into the report of the Auditor General, as we've always done over the years. At any point in time, Parliament may decide to appoint an ad hoc committee or a different committee to look into it. But before you ask the conversation or you ask that state-owned enterprises should not be examined by the Public Accounts Committee, you need to tell us that maybe public account lacks the capacity to do so. What it also means is that it is an indictment on the leadership which is being chaired by members of the minority. So at no point in time has public account come out to say that we are not capable of looking into issues of losses by any of the state-owned enterprises. But let me tell you, there is a certain erroneous impression being thrown about in this debate that somehow when a state-owned enterprise records a loss, it is a crime. That erroneous impression must be corrected, because a loss in itself does not necessarily mean that any unlawful act has taken place. I will give you examples. If today the Ghana Water Company, government decides that due to certain challenges, they want to grant subsidy on water, it is likely to affect the profit margins of Ghana Water Company. And so by the end of the year, if Ghana Water Company records or reports a loss and it is captured in Auditor General's report, it does not necessarily mean that any unlawful thing happened. It becomes a crime only when you are able to establish that that loss came about because of some procurement breaches, some internal weak controls, or some way, somehow, inefficiency, on the part of the managers of that institution.
That is what the minority is making.
And if that is the position of the minority has the right to call for investigations into any state institution. And in fact, every member of parliament have various tools available to us to demand accountability. You can either even read a statement, ask questions, file a motion, and what have you. And so we cannot stop the minority or any member of parliament from demanding answers to some of these issues. That we cannot do. But in calling for the establishment of a separate or a bipartisan committee, we need to be given sufficient reasons why the already established committees of parliament are not capable of dealing with this issue.
The argument,
and let me say this,
has been
Beatrice,
the urgency and the enormity of
the agency Public Accounts Committee sits even during recess. We were on recess. We were called out of recess only recently to deal with some 3 urgent issues. Even from the very day we went on recess, my committee, my other committee, which is a select committee, education, almost every single day, the education committee sat to consider audit reports of the various educational institutions. You mentioned that you are a PhD student at UPSA. Even the UPSA leadership, led by the Vice Chancellor, they appeared before the Education Committee only a week or so ago to speak to audit reports. Now, what people may not even know is that beyond the Public Accounts Committee, even at the Select Committee level, these institutions has, you can be summoned, you can be invited to answer questions. And I tell you this for a fact. Gold Board appeared before the Economy Committee of Parliament. And that is the committee they are responsible to.
And indeed, if you look
Gold
at your
Board appeared
orders,
before the Finance Committee of Parliament as well. And this issue of whether or not Gold Board recorded losses, this is not the first time it has come up in Parliament. And I tell you, even as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, when the governor of the Bank of Ghana, the Venerable Dr. Esiama, appeared before us, questions on Gold Board's operations and whether or not they recorded losses were posed to him, and the answers were provided. So what I feel is that there seems to be a certain agenda to have sustained discussions on Gold Board, and continue lambasting the institution and put it in a certain negative light. And I'm saying this, that if you believe that Gold Board or any state-owned enterprise has done something untoward, something unlawful, and for which reason they must answer questions in Parliament, let us just go through the right procedures and processes and have those questions answered. But to create the impression that it is only a so-called bipartisan committee that can address the issues of losses of SOEs, for me, is not appropriate because, again, when you mention bipartisan committee, I say, but public account is already bipartisan with 25 members. And it is one of the few committees of parliament being led by members of the opposition. And so if there is anything like agenda setting at the committee level, for public accounts, it is even supposed to be led by the members of opposition. And so that should be the encouragement to even have public accounts deal with those issues. But I tell you this, when you look at the Auditor General's report, I should have brought a copy. As we prepare to start sitting on the 2025 report, I have in my hand very voluminous books, about 28 of them, 28 reports, that I'm currently going through before the sittings commence. I have read this Auditor General's report, and I am yet to find where it is indicated that Gold Board, an institution that was established by an act of parliament in 2025, have recorded losses. Maybe people are just afraid that because the Auditor General's report, and you see in all of these conversations, the 2025 audit report is ready. And we've thrown a challenge. Maybe because of how voluminous these books are, these reports are, I have not yet gotten to the page where the Auditor General has captured Gold Board as having recorded losses. And so we challenge them to put these figures out there. Beatrice, the question should not be whether it should be a bipartisan committee or PAC. It should rather be which of these pathways gives Parliament the strongest, the most credible way of ensuring that we build public confidence in our institutions. I go through these reports all the time, and I weep, I bleed. And when you go through the reports of 2023, 2024, 2022, repeatedly, Beatrice, our state institutions, and this conversation is not about Gold Board, it's about state-owned enterprises. For many of the state-owned enterprises, the 2024 report, when you go through them, almost every state-owned enterprise recorded huge losses. Huge losses. So if you want to equate losses to crime, then let us extend the conversation to those. We must be interested in looking at the way forward. How do we ensure that Thor that used to run at a loss, that it was almost sold cheaply in the market today, has been turned around?
So
how do we ensure proper management at these places? How do we ensure that ECG, that was recording over 8 billion as losses annually on the average, today the loss has reduced to 2? How do we move it to ensure that it makes profit? That must be the focus of the conversation.
So let me come in here. Your statement admits that indeed every year we see this happening. Is that not indicative? Doesn't it support the fact that perhaps the Public Accounts Committee has not been able to fully, as it were, hold people accountable with its work and the need for us to be looking at other committees? Like you rightly said, we have the Finance Committee and we also have the Economy and Development Committee as well. When you read the standing orders, they seem to be even giving preeminence, as it were, when it comes to looking into some of these things.
Yeah, but you see, when you look at the work of the Public Accounts Committee, how do we do our work? Our work is mainly based on the audit reports presented to us by the Auditor General. When we are done, we present our report to Parliament. And I can tell you that number of recoveries have been made. We have recommended some people for prosecution. And that is where our work ends. You surcharge them, you invite people to answer questions, you ask them to make recoveries, and if you follow our proceedings religiously, you will recover that a number of people appear and they tell us that because of the committee, they have refunded certain amounts. Now, we need to go beyond. When we talk about losses again, it is not necessarily an issue of any unlawful act. That's why I'm saying that we need to really be looking at how do we inject proper and efficient management into our SOEs. That is where the conversation should be headed to. That how do we ensure that Ghana Water Company, how do we ensure that Electricity Company of Ghana, how do we ensure that TOR, NPA, Boss Energies, and all of these institutions, state-owned enterprises, really do make profit, or at least they are financially viable? Because let's not forget, not all the SOEs were also established with the purpose of making profit. So we must look at it from the angle of efficiency
are the institutions serving the purpose for which they were established. When we move the conversation to that angle and we take out the personalities, then we can make progress. But I tell you this, the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, at least the Public Accounts Committee of the 9th Parliament, of which I am a member, is capable of dealing with all the issues raised in the Auditor General's report.
And I want to come to you, Dr. Boachi Adom, ending where the Honorable Edem Agbana ended, which is which of the committees or which approach do we need to use that will give us the best result? And I want to read some of the standing orders and the responsibilities to you. If you look at the Finance Committee, the Standing Order 2261 talks about, actually 2, says the committee, as in the Finance Committee, shall examine any matters that relate to monetary and fiscal policies, loan and financial transactions generally. Again, I referred to the Committee on Economy and Development, and it's the Standing Order 230, and when you look at 2, it says the committee shall have referred to it matters that relate to the economy and development planning generally, and have jurisdiction to investigate and inquire into the activities and administration of ministries, departments and agencies under the mandate of the committee. And then, of course, 262 talks about the Parliament of Ghana having the power, as it were, to set up a special or ad hoc committee. The Honorable Edem Agbana talked about the role of the Public Account Committee, and that's spelled out in 229. And if you read from 1 to 4, it says the Public Account Committee. Okay, so 1 talks about the chairman, but if you look at 3, it says pursuant to Article 182, 2 and 5 of the Constitution, the Public Account Committee shall examine the public accounts of Ghana, showing the appropriation and utilization of the sums granted by Parliament to meet the public expenditure of the government and other accounts laid before Parliament. And of course, it talks about other administrative staff as well. Having read this to you, and I believe that you also do understand how all of these things work, I want to ask you the question about which of the institutions or the processes do you believe at this stage, looking at what we are discussing now, would help deal with the matter in terms of investigating and holding people accountable if there's a need to do so?
Thank you, Beatrice. I think that any legitimate question to solicit for information, to bring clarity to an entity's operation should be welcome, and I'm sure both sides of the House agree to this. And the Honourable just mentioned that they are not against that. But as to which institution that is best placed to handle, I think it lies in the bosom of the one that is demanding for the inquiry to suggest which of the committees that will best address. In this case, if the minority thinks that establishing a special ad hoc committee will serve the interest and to be able to ask some relevant question, so be it. Because I think that transparency dispels doubt, and it is enable the public to even understand the operations better. So I would not say we should put the issue at PAC or any other committee, but rather the one who is asking for the information believes, and which is, if so permitted by their standing orders, I don't think there should be a challenge in addressing the issue through that means. But let me mention something. You see, the debate, we should look at the losses in the state-owned enterprises broadly. And there are times that because in preparation of your financial statement, whether you are preparing using, especially the FSAS, there are some allowable or some standards that allow you to treat certain items differently. It may hide certain inefficiencies that we are unable to shed light on. So some of these public inquiries or committees are able to ask relevant questions. For example, when I looked at the Gold Board financial statement, there are certain things that if I was part of probably the Public Accounts Committee or any other, I will ask. If we look at, I think, page 6, I'm coming, let me make reference to the exact page. Page number 6 of the audited statement, it states that, page 5 rather, it states that the government subvention of 4.547.7 billion Ghana cedi was provided as a revolving trade capital to support gold purchases, trading and export operation of the Gold Board. You admit that government has provided you with capital to support your activities. Then you use a different standard to classify it as a grant to report it as part of your revenue. Then it bloats out your surpluses to about 5.45 billion Ghana cedis. Why didn't we look at it in terms of IPSAS 23? That says that owner's contribution should rather be classified as a net asset rather than looking at it in terms of revenue. So there are more questions that we may have to look at it, so that we don't project. It is even good to know that either your surplus or you are incurring some losses, to put in measures if there's a need for the fees and charges to be hiked, to be increased a little. Because last year by December, we reduced the fees and charges slightly. Is there a way that it is affecting Gold Board activity in terms of the actual revenue? If we scale it down, if we take that portion out of the revenue, you are left with about 896 million Ghana cedis. Then you look at the Gold Board activities with Bank of Ghana, and it generated a revenue around 827 million, which is partly, like I have stated earlier, in terms of the rate at which they take Gold Board take the funding from BOG and also trade with the buyers at forex rate. Obviously, to create some inconveniences for Bank of Ghana. Yes, I can agree, Bank of Ghana can make losses. But we should also understand that the fact that an entity is not a profit-making entity does not automatically make it a loss-making entity. Because in the long run, if the losses compile...
Hello, Doc. Okay, it looks like we've lost him there, but we'll bring him back and then conclude his thoughts on that. But you're still here on Agenda on TV3. When we come back, we'll look at the way forward for SOEs that are still making losses and what we need to do.
So fresh, good taste. So fresh, good taste. Taste it, feel it, give me, darling lemon. My darling, I want it, I need it. So fresh, good taste, just the way you want it. Taste it, feel it, give me, darling lemon. My darling, I want it.
Will you be my darling?
Yes.
Drink responsibly. This advert is FDA approved. Darling lemon drink. Taste it. Feel it.
When the girl you like likes you back. All you need is something red, sweet, tasty, smooth. That is XYZ red wine flavored alcoholic drink. XYZ red wine flavored alcoholic drink. Serve chilled. Drink smoothly. Drink responsibly. Not for sale to persons under 18. Not recommended for pregnant women. This advert is FDA approved.
When the sun rises, there is hope. While this hope lingers on, the citizens look up to the government, the economy, the national development agenda, and everything in between.
On Ghana Tonight, it's our utmost priority to bring you insightful conversations on the economy, break down the biggest issues while setting the agenda for transformation and national development. The big and important stories are treated from the human interest angle, while the facts and the figures are painted with precision. So now, let's cut the convention and start the conversation here on Ghana Tonight. I am your host, Alfred Okanse.
Ghana Tonight shows Monday to Friday at 10 p.m. on TV3. Brought to you by
Flamingo Paint, superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.
Kel Charcoal Toothpaste.
And it's so here on Agenda on TV3 tonight. We are talking about how to deal with the losses of SOEs and really the way to probe it to discourage, those who may be doing wrong within them to ensure that we save some money for the state. I want to return to you, Dr. Boachi Adam, for you to land on your thought. And I wanted to ask you, earlier you made a point about the fact that reading through even the Auditor General's report, among others, there were certain critical questions that you would have asked if you were at PAC. Are you saying that those questions could not or cannot be asked at PAC, and therefore you support those calling for other committees to come in?
No, the point I'm making is that I have I'm demanding some answers, and I feel like my answers will be best addressed through a certain channel. I think whoever is calling for that is entitled to it, and the two sides of the house, I'm sure they believe in these ways of addressing issues. So my point is we should not narrow. So far as it's within the remit of their standing order and it doesn't bring any form of illegality, I think it should be allowed and that they will be able to ask some relevant questions. That they may feel, with given the circumstances, they will be able to get the best answers.
I want to come to you again, Mr. Okanse, regarding the way forward, how to ensure that we're using the right methods to investigate what ought to be investigated to save some money for the state.
Yeah, so quickly, I'll just use a few seconds. The beyond the arguments and we need to know some of the causes, what are causing these losses. Wastage is one of them, corruption is another, poor management is another, political interference is another, procurement that's a wicked problem. Procurement is one of the wicked problems in the system, and then limited and poor funding, where you don't have investors. The case of WACO is one. You also have the overstaffing. Politically, you go to some of the institutions, they are overstaffed. And that means you are overrunning the operation budget. That is one of the issues you need to talk about. There's a deliberate rundown. Nobody can explain to me why Attackway can use Mommy Track in those days and buy more. And then Metro Mass will be accumulating rotten buses and be selling them at low cost. That's a deliberate rundown. For somebody to sit down and watch Tor go down and then tell me they want to sell it is a deliberate rundown. For La Palm case, it's a deliberate rundown. No run away from it. That's deliberate. Then you go to the next one, poor interagency collaboration. Why should government vehicles be insuring out there when there's SIC? Sickening, to start with. In my house, when my grandmother was trading, selling kinky, selling firewood, You mean that, to be fair enough, my grandmother should leave the firewood that she's selling and go and buy firewood from outside somewhere else, from the family business? I mean, that is sickening. The early people who were not in the classroom didn't make mistakes that we are making. It takes only a directive to correct this one. Again, I mean, weak sanctions. You motivate offenders when they cause you the losses and they sit there. So what do you want to do? You strengthen internal audit systems and controls, the CEO, the board. You've not mentioned the sector ministers. All these people, some of these state-owned enterprises run underneath some ministers' control. And they actually need to make sure these companies are working. You need to enhance your internal audit systems and ensure that there's a whistleblower system in place. Within the institution, some people know and see things. And if you give incentives enough, they will blow it out before. I mean, you ask yourself, who saw it and who kept quiet? And the internal auditor was the person there. Must he take the auditor general to come and see some of these things? That's another question you need to ask yourself. The CEOs, they should be engaged on contract with targets. I mean, if they are not hitting targets, you fire them, hire and fire, pay
but we
them
had
well.
the president say that when he took over office
That's
in,
what we have to do. We need to reduce political interference. There's always the quest. I mean, we've seen it before, where there are directives where you saw GMPC sponsoring festivals and all that. These are things you need to check, and it's being checked properly today. So that's what the problems were. The proper tendering processes, the wicked problem, solve it well. Make sure tendering goes on properly, and then we solve that problem. It's also key. You need to also ensure that there is sufficient and a timely release of funding. The case of WACO also scouts for investors. Back our advice, we should look at local direct investments rather than foreign direct investors. I mean, let's look at internal structures first. Expand operations. I mean, for these institutions that I told you that you have a backlog of staffing, you need to expand or possibly reassign people. And then finally, I look at enhancing the enforcement of integrity within the collaborative efforts. I mean, why should LAPAM be sitting and idling when I see government agencies organize programs at private hotels? I told you, some of our problems too is a thinking problem with no apology. It takes a directive to ensure that at least 20% or 30% of agencies that are organizing their programs should target the state-owned institutions like that one. So for the internal ones, you know, internal auditing system, the professional CEO who should be hired on contract, the ministers and the board should work. And then externally, you have the Auditor General, you have the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, you have SIGA. In all this discussion, where's SIGA? SIGA should play a major role in all these discussions. And then the CSOs, whistleblowers, yourself and myself, the media, we need to call them out when we hear the information from them. When you come to the corruption handling, where there's stealing and poor practices, BNI is there, Office of Special Prosecutor is there, the Attorney General's Department is there, you have the CID, YOCO, SHAJ, and even in Parliament, there are subcommittees on finance and the rest. All those ones also have a role to play in checking these state-owned enterprises. So indeed, we are overloaded, like you were saying. How do we get to control it? We are overloaded with the institutions. You see, I mentioned about 8 institutions here and agencies that are supposed to check and make sure that these state-owned enterprises work.
And
I
Joshua,
mean, when we make sure they work well, we'll be good to go.
Joshua says on YouTube, says, I strongly support Mr. Okanse that there's no need for bipartisan committee to probe the losses incurred by the Gold Board on behalf of the Bank of Ghana. And Justice says, I'm not sure you know better than the AG. I don't know the context in which you're speaking. And then there is also a message coming in from Chachuchi Kata Jr. It says, good evening, Beatrice, and my strategic, young, energetic member of Parliament, Honorable Edem Agbana. Truly, I must commend President Mahama and his appointees who are showing real courage by facing accountability head-on, unlike others who dodge scrutiny at every turn. This is the kind of leadership Ghana has been yearning for. Special commendation to Sami Jemfi, the CEO. And then he says, as for the minority leader, the facts speak for themselves. Ghana is working again. I want to come to you moving forward, really. And I did refer to what the president said, even when he took office in 2025, that there was a need for us to stop the bleeding within the SOEs. Moving forward, really, what would you say as somebody who also helps with drafting our laws, among others, and overseeing the executive regarding what we must do to ensure that we are able to minimize this challenge?
Well, I think that even before I answer that question, it's important for me to place on record that President Mahama and his government have done some substantial work in trying to restructure even the outlook of some of these state-owned enterprises. As we speak, one of the very important laws that we have passed in this current parliament is the value for money bill that we passed. What it means is that even though you are a state-owned enterprise, before you procure any item, there is an office that is ensuring that there is value for money. We've been in this country and we saw in the past institutions that spent millions of dollars, millions of Ghana cedis on furniture. State-owned enterprises that wasted public funds on travels. Today, you simply cannot do that. I belong to a board. And one of the very, very, very first directives we received from the president through the chief of staff was that you cannot travel outside this country for trainings or for board trainings. In the past, a board in Ghana, a board of an SOE that was making losses, will travel to the United States, lodge in 5-star hotels, buy business class tickets, first class, for training, so-called training. Those things are no more there. And so we need to acknowledge that even though we are not yet there, we've made some substantial progress in ensuring that there is efficiency in how we manage our SOEs.
So are you saying
Moving
that the
forward,
SOEs have improved in terms of how much
yes,
they are?
Yes, we have improved. And let me tell you, that is why it's public knowledge that some SOEs complain about the finance minister simply because today you need commitment authorization. And so before you buy even this, you must get the commitment authorization, which means you must justify why you want 1 million Ghana cedis to invest in whatever. And so all these internal controls being put in place by the government is making it practically impossible for the managers of these institutions to engage in any wastage. About the KPIs, the president first promised that he was going to develop codes of ethics for his appointees. That has been done. So the code of ethics was launched. Every appointee of President Mahama is expected to live within those regulations. Beyond that, we have also promised that we will develop KPIs for institutions so that when you are appointed as the CEO of a state-owned agency, you know that these are the performance indicators expected of you within this particular period. That I can tell you is also being developed. Beatrice, but you see, we need to have time, enough time, sufficient time to have a conversation on our state-owned enterprises.
Our time is almost up.
We need to categorize our state-owned enterprises. Yeah. Some are strategic and profit-making. Some are strategic but loss-making. Those that are strategic and profit-making, how do we expand them so they bring in more money? I agree with my brother Okanse. Sometimes it's simply difficult for you to understand. How do we invest? Why did we invest so much money? Even public transport, we cannot manage. At this time, go to 37, go to Circle, see the number of people in a queue, and see the number of buses that were bought either for STC, for either Ayalolo, or the Metro Mass. And all these institutions, the buses have broken down. Nobody is taking responsibility. We need to get to a point where if you lead a state-owned enterprise and you are unable to efficiently account for your stewardship, people need to be punished. So when the punishment regime increases, it will serve as a deterrent to others. We need to, as a country, have a look at how to restructure some of these institutions.
In 30 seconds, we know that the minority leader has already filed that motion. The speaker has spoken about it. You're sure that the Gold Board CEO is ready to face whichever committee that will be set up to prove this matter?
Parliament is like the second office of the Gold Board CEO. He's appeared before every committee that he ought to have appeared before. And he came before Economic Committee, he came before Finance Committee. And like I told you, even he is inviting us to invite him to appear before Public Accounts Committee. But why are we trying to cook a non-existing loss that is not on their books? And I'm telling you that I can produce the recordings of our engagement with the governor of the Bank of Ghana when the question on whether or not losses were incurred by Gold Board was posed to him. And he answered. Because these things are not even, if there is any loss at all, some costs, accounting costs, whatever, it is not sitting on the books of Gold Board. And the Auditor General's report is out. And I am saying that if you are saying that Gold Board recorded losses in 2025, tell us which page of the Auditor General's report cites those losses.
We'll have to
Nobody is able to point out to that. And we keep dragging this. Let's allow Gold Board to function.
The Honourable Adam Agbana, Member of Parliament for Kwetu North. He is also the member of the Public Accounts Committee. Thank you very much for joining us to have this conversation. We've also had in studio with us Mr. Jeffrey Okanse, anti-corruption advocate. Thank you very much as well for joining us. And of course, via video call, Dr. Eric Boachi Adam, financial economist and senior lecturer at the UPSA. My name is Beatrice. Thank you very much for joining us on Agenda tonight. So do join us again next week. Coming up shortly is Ghana Tonight. Stay with us.
That is not exactly what I said.
We need proper context.
Let's not politicize this. At the appropriate time, we will respond.
In Ghana, there's never a shortage of conversations. There's always a statement, always an excuse, always a deflection. But when the nation needs answers, too often the chair is empty. On key points, we do not debate around absence. We confront it.
The central bank has been buying gold from 2021.
It has been said 60 to 80% of that small scale gold is galaxy.
We are still paying the damage they caused.
This economy is not serving the purpose it is supposed to serve.
If it matters to Ghana, it must be faced. Key points, face the issues. Key points, never miss the key moments. Every Saturday, 7 a.m. on TV3 and on 3FM 92.7.
Brought to you by Bank of Africa, GASEM.
The news never stops. If it's not breaking, developing, the news lends